All right, in this video I'm going to show you how to do a VLOOKUP. And a VLOOKUP is just a compare of two Excel spreadsheets. Let's say we had list 1 and list 2, and we wanted to find out, let's say list 1 was a master list and it had like everybody. And we wanted to find out of that master list, how many of those people also were on list 2. All we would do is enter a new column here. So you can name it whatever you want, compare. And you'd insert a VLOOKUP. Now, first, before we do that, when you do a VLOOKUP, you want to make sure that you have a field to compare it to that is unique. By that I mean Social Security number is a good unique field because no two people have the same Social Security number. In this example, I'm only using the last 4 of an SSN, so it's not the best example because it is possible for 2 different people to have the same last 4 of their Social Security number. And in that case, you wouldn't want to risk it. You want to either use a different field that would be unique to only that individual, maybe like an employee number, or if you really couldn't get that, you could combine 2 fields to make it unique. So I could go equals Social Security number and sign, that's Shift 7, and then something like address. It would be very unlikely that 2 people would have the same last 4 of their Social Security number plus the exact same address. And you could just create a new unique identifier that way. But let's say for this example, I'm going to delete that. Let's say that I was using the full SSN right here. And I wanted to make sure, I wanted to find out who on this list is also on list 2. I would just create the new compare column, and I would go insert, function, double click VLOOKUP. Now I'm using the Mac version of Excel. The PC version should be very similar. It might look a little bit different, but the steps should be the same. It should be insert, function, and then choose VLOOKUP. And you'll have these 4 fields to fill out. The lookup value is just that unique identifier that we were talking about. So in this case, it's SSN. So you want to click on that once, that field right there. That's the field you're comparing. The table array is the set of fields that you're comparing that to. So on list 2, a simple example would be, we're just going to click on the list 2 tab, and then I'm just going to compare the SSNs. So let's just highlight column A. You could click and drag if you only wanted to compare it to a subset. You could just do it that way. But if you're working with a big list, it's probably easiest if you go highlight the whole thing. And be careful because I just showed you 2 different things. As I clicked both, it added to the formula. So let's bring that back. All right. So in the column index number, since we only highlighted one column, column A, we only have one column. So I'm going to hit a 1 there. I'll show you what it would look like if we were going to use multiple columns later. In this range lookup, you just want to enter false, F-A-L-S-E, enter, and now you have your value. Double click on the bottom right to copy it down. If for some reason you had, if this list had some people that didn't have their address right here, doing that double click would stop the compare wherever the last address was. So if I had a gap right here and then the list kept going, that double click would only stay here. You'd have to either click and drag all the way down to make sure you got the VLOOKUP to count everybody, or before you do the VLOOKUP, you'd want to sort out and fill in any blanks if there were blank addresses. Hope that makes sense. So for this example, basically what that VLOOKUP tells us is that all these people except for these 4 are on list 2. Those 4 people are not on list 2, but everybody else is on both list 1 and list 2. Now, if you were working with 2 partial lists, now for this example, we're assuming list 1 is a full list, and we were just trying to find out who on list 1 was also on list 2. But if you had 2 partial lists and you wanted to find out all the overlaps or all the places where people were on both lists, you'd want to go back and make sure that there aren't any people on list 2 that aren't on list 1. So let me just show an example. Let's just do the whole VLOOKUP process over again. I'll just add a compare field here. I'm going to hit VLOOKUP. Lookup value is just that SSN again. Click here. Table array is that field that I'm going to compare it to. There we go. Column index number is going to be 1 and then false. Double click it. So you can see there's 4 people that aren't on the other list, but these aren't the same 4 people. Look, if you look, it's Steve, Sally, Justin, Michael. Oh, this is Adam, this is Bill, this is Christina, and this is Ellen. So if you're working with partial lists, you might have to do that VLOOKUP from both sides to get a full all-encompassing list of overlap, if that makes sense. Again, if you only did it one way, you might miss the fact that there was that Steve, Sally, Justin, and Michael were not on the other list. So hopefully that makes sense. Generally, if you're working with a master list on one, then you don't have to worry about doing it vice versa. But sometimes you'll have to do the VLOOKUP on both sides if you really wanted to get a full, all-encompassing list. If that confuses you, don't worry about it. It'll make sense later on. Now, one more thing that you can do with VLOOKUPs. Let's delete this out. Let's say what I wanted to do was I had a report that gave me SSN name and address here, but I also had another report that gave me another field, like maybe status code. Let me delete this compare here. And let's say I wanted to pull the status code from the other one to over here. Well, I could do that with a VLOOKUP as well. I would just go click here, double click on VLOOKUP, or again, if this was closed, I could just start over. It would be insert VLOOKUP function VLOOKUP. Lookup value is going to be that SSN. Table array is the area I'm going to compare it to. Since I want to have this status code field as well, I'm going to highlight all 4 of those columns. And column index number, since I want to pull that status code field in, I'm going to put column index number 4. Then I'm going to put false. Enter. Double click down. And there you go. It pulled the status code from the other list over to here for all the matches. Now, there's some people that weren't matches. You'd have to go and either run another report or do a manual VLOOKUP somewhere or manual lookup or something to get those stragglers. But if you were going to pull from a different field from another list, this is how you'd go about doing it. One other thing to note, too. The column index number is not the column number based, like it's not always A is 1, B is 2, C is 3. Let's do this for example. Let's insert a column. Let's say, or let's insert a few columns just for example's sake. Okay, let's say I had a whole bunch of different fields here and, employee ID, first name, last name, whatever else, and I wanted to compare the 2 lists. I could go back here. Let's do the VLOOKUP over. Delete. Start over again. I'll go insert function VLOOKUP SSN table array. On the other side, I'm going to go back here and just made it and say I want to pull in status codes again. I highlighted 4 columns, but it wasn't A doesn't equal 1, B doesn't equal 2. It's just the number counts from where I highlight. So if I wanted to pull in status code, it would still be column 4, even though it's a lot more columns in the list. And you want to hit false. Oop. Double click down. There you go. So that's the basics of VLOOKUPs and different basic things that you can do with it. Certainly let me know if you have any questions, and I will also send you in a Microsoft Word kind of procedure that walks you through what each of these means, and try a few on your own. Once you do a few, it's really easy. At first it's a little bit confusing, certainly was for me the first time I did it, but once you get through a few, it really is a piece of cake. So yeah, just let me know if you have any questions.